Good morning and welcome to Better Thyself segment of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We know and we have heard enough that mind can make heaven out of hell and hell out of heaven. The power of mind is so much and so impactful that the people hardly realize it. People are more concerned with the power of the brain, which is important. But with brain, you conquer the externals. And with the help of mind, you can conquer yourself. And by conquering yourself, you can conquer the whole world. And that's a real victory. But do you know your mind? I could hardly believe it. But then, about 3 years back, I felt seriously sick. Doctor sent me to hospice saying that I have a couple of days to live. We went to the hospice and I came back disgusted with the state of affairs in the hospice. And I and my wife, we decided, okay, we'll die at home. And then with mindfulness, with exercising my mind, diverting my attention from the pain and the misery and the oncoming death, we refuse to oblige death and we refuse to oblige the doctors. And 3 years have passed and I'm still living, maybe living on a borrowed time. But the power of the mind is so much that it can enable you to overcome most of the difficulties, if not all. I agree, it's very good and very grand to conquer external nature. But I said, conquering the internal nature, your mind, is better still. It's good to know the laws that govern the stars and the planets. But it's definitely grander and better to know the laws that govern the passions, the feelings, the will of mankind, which are only through the mind. As a matter of fact, there is a curious thinking and a dichotomy in our attitude towards mind. The Western thinking till recently has been that the brain is more important, and mind was not treated as an independent entity, not any longer. They have veered round to the Oriental view that the mind is much more important than anything else. The ancient scientists, seers, philosophers of India, Japan, China questioned this concept of body brain. And then they realized that by brain, you become conscious and become a knower, a living being. And by discovering the power of mind, the status of mind, the subtlety of mind, you understand yourself and are able to overcome all impediments. Now, how do you understand your mind? That's the point. We always say the mind will give a birth to your thoughts, and you are what you think. You implement your thoughts positively in a way to gain for yourself and for the society, and you are successful. But how do you know your mind? That's a $1 million question. And most of the people talk about mindfulness. Be mindful, take care of your mind. But how do you know? One thing is clear that the first urge is from the mind. Without analysis, the immediate gut feeling that you have, that's mind. And then you started weighing positives, negatives, pros, cons. That's brain function. And then the mind smiles and says, okay, let this guy go ahead, stumble, or be successful. But he has ignored the warning, he has ignored the sign, and he has sinned. So you have got to understand your mind is the subtlest, formless, all previous. And that's the way I define it. The most subtle thing in the world, the most formless thing in the world, like God, those who believe in God, is all pervasive, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. And then it acts as a bridge between matter and consciousness. And that is, you can call it soul, you can call it God. So if you know your mind, you know your soul. And if you know it, you know God, if there is God. So being subtlest, mind is the closest proximity of knowing principles, consciousness. Now, if you know consciousness, all those impediments become secondary in nature. The mind, though matter, draws its consciousness from the spirit. Just as an iron in proximity with a fire glows and becomes red hot, mind drawing its power from the consciousness and from the spirit becomes more active provided you give it the heat and makes you a living being. It's a conscious knower. And as a matter of fact, to put in simple language, it is an instrument of perception, how you perceive things. Do you perceive things as a human being? Do you perceive things as a conscious being? Do you perceive things where you can detach yourself from the materialistic aspect and yet not become an ascetic? So, our basic ignorance is that we are conscious because of our identity. That's what we think. In reality, mind itself is a matter and it just borrows consciousness. Or rather, it is a catalyst which makes consciousness become more active, more agile, more predominant. Then, linked to our mind, we become separate, self centered, because then pure brain comes in. It's a bunny attitude. So, you want to be a bunny where profit and loss the main thing, and that also in monetary sense. But if you are able to comprehend your mind and the reality that is linked to consciousness, then you are at, in consonance with nature. And that's a godly quality as a matter of fact. All religions basically teach you to be virtuous, cultivate humility, reduce ego. No, you have got to ensure that your ego doesn't predominate your mind. That's the only thing. The murmuring, you see, one thing you would be should be careful about. Mind doesn't shout. It doesn't shout from the housetop the way ego would do. But it's a soft murmur. And it's in consonance when the breeze is blowing or when the butterfly is moving around the flower, there's no noise. But you can see the beauty and you can be lost in that. You can see the waves coming in an ocean and are in tune with them. And then your mind takes over. So it's really the subtle field for you for the flow of thoughts. No, that's the second part. First, it will murmur and give expression to the thoughts. Second, it is allowing the thought flow unimpeded. And the result is that all our feelings, experiences, perceptions, awareness through all the organs of touch, hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, even growing and decaying are perceived in the proper perspective. And you can observe the flow of the thought and feelings and implying that these thoughts and feelings are alien to us. So you develop an attitude of an objective watcher and listener. And that objectivity is a hallmark of your capability as a better human being. You see, as long as you are involved, as long as personally involved to you, you cannot be objective. But when you observe the flow and you find that you are no longer just X, Y, or Z, you are the knower, you are the observer of your thoughts, and you're independent of your thoughts. They are just objects. Even thought becomes an object at that time. And your mind is modulating, transforming those thoughts. Mind is formed out of the subtlest part of the food, and therefore your intake to the five senses is important. You see, until and unless you can synchronize your five senses, the sense of hearing, the sense of sight, the sense of touch, the sense of smell, and the ESP, extrasensory perception, you should be able to feel and let your mind be free to receive all the vibrations. And that would be important. Normally, what happens is we ignore the murmuring, as in life. The voluble, the louder the person is, the noisy the persons are, you listen to them. But the quiet but honest people get ignored. That's what happens with the mind as well. You are getting ignored only because you are not shouting. So here, you have to ensure that the mind's murmuring, prodding is not ignored, but is it you rather I would say that murmuring should be an enabler for you to do better. And then one thing more, mind is not only your instrument of perception, but it also acts as a cover which does not allow you to become aware of the fact that real source of your mind is not your mind only, but the consciousness behind it. Now, I have always been saying that human consciousness is all pervasive and is connected with nature. And the mind is the cover for that. If you know your mind, you know the whole cosmos. And this knowledge not being available to you makes you feel that only body, brain, and to some extent mind complex is important. It's not. We have got to ensure our priorities in a different way. Till now, what we have been talking, all those proverbs, which have no meaning. A sound mind in its own body. Yes. But what then we ignore brain. Then we say you should be brainy. But then if we prioritize, it should be mind, brain, body. And let me tell you again, this priority is very, very insignificant because they are all at par. But if mind is powerful, the body would obey its direction. And that's what the Indian concept of Ichha Shakti and Ichha Mrityu, even death by wish. That is because the mind brain body complex becomes too potent. You see, the mankind's goal and the real purpose is to identify with the consciousness. So the first thing is to befriend your mind, purify it, and that will reveal the reality to you and make you a better human being. It's a continuous flow of thought. Now, saying another thing, the way brain is working 24 by 7, right from the time you are conceived, your brain starts working. So does mind. There's a continuous flow of thoughts. Some are wanted, some are unwanted. And by its very nature, mind has a tendency to flow down and enjoy the experience of the senses. But it percolates all those experiences. And the fineness comes to the top like cream, comes to the top where you boil the milk. It's difficult to lift up and control. And mind is like the flow of a river. So that's the major thing. One is quietly murmurs. You ignore it, it goes on. The second thought comes, the third thought comes. So you have to catch it for the, as they say, proverb is catching time for the forelock. Here you have to catch the thought by the forelock. Get attached to it. And then another thing. There are four functions which the mind performs. And those functions are performed at a lightning speed. You can't even imagine how sharp and quick your mind can work as a representation of human being, what we call manas. It receives and coordinates all the inputs by the sense organs. So that coordination is a continuous one, and that coordination and that perception that are received are conveyed to the brain. Then the second is it's a storehouse of all your memories and impressions. Then it's a part of the intellect, which chooses, decides, and responds. And then it becomes your ego. That is a time when your ego, without being selfish, is predominant. And when, you see, that's what happens. Until you have ego, now ego and selfishness has to be separated. You can be an egoist and yet be concerned with the welfare of everybody. So the quality of thoughts should reduce the quantity of unwanted thoughts and force thoughts towards your goal. The goal to be decided by the murmur of the mind. Do not think that players are bad. No. Doing even the most arduous task is a pleasant task, provided you apply your mind to it. And believe me, it will make you a person and the people will envy you. And what better thing can be that your equals consider you worth talking about, thinking about? So know thy mind and be successful. Know thy mind means knowing yourself, putting yourself on a higher pedestal. So, right from this moment, identify what your mind tells you, listen to it, carry out its dictates, ensure the thoughts are there properly executed, and you would be battering yourself, battering in a peerless manner. Thank you.